If you've lived in Arizona long enough, you've probably been closer to ghost towns than you realize. Across this state are places where entire communities once lived, and today, many of them are completely gone. These are 12 ghost towns in Arizona, and number 1 will blow your mind. Number 12, Two Guns, Arizona. This place was cursed before anyone ever built a single building on it, and everything that happened after only made it worse. In 1878, 42 people were trapped in a canyon cave along Canyon Diablo by enemies who lit fires at the entrance and shot anyone who tried to escape. That cave sat on the ground that would later become Two Guns. Nobody who built thereafter seemed to know what they were standing on, or maybe they did, and built there anyway. In the 1920s, a drifter named Harry Miller leased the land, installed electric lights inside the cave, built a concession stand at the entrance, and sold the bones of the dead as souvenirs to motorists on the highway. He called himself Two Gun Miller, claimed ancestry he almost certainly didn't have, and added a zoo of mountain lions and rattlesnakes for atmosphere. In 1926, Miller got into a lease dispute with his landlord Earl Cundiff and shot him dead. Miller was eventually released, returned to Two Guns, and lived alone in the ruins. His store burned down. His mountain lion attacked him so many times that the infections from the wounds nearly cost him his arm, and he stayed anyway. Further legal trouble followed, and he vanished from the record entirely. Today, the ruins of the trading post and the zoo cages sit beside Interstate 40 between Flagstaff and Winslow. The canyon is still there. The cave is still there. The rubble of a business built on top of a massacre is still there, for anyone willing to pull off the highway and look. Number 11, Ruby, Arizona. This one should be taught in school. The same building, robbed twice in 2 years. Everyone inside killed both times. And the way the second case broke open is something most people have never heard. Between 1920 and 1922, the same building in the same remote Arizona mining town was robbed twice. Both times, everyone inside was killed. The first robbery triggered the largest manhunt in the history of the Southwest. The second involved the first airplane ever used in an Arizona law enforcement pursuit. The building is still standing. The town has been closed to the public since 2024. At its peak, Ruby had 1,200 residents and a general store that was the center of daily life in the valley. The kind of place where everyone knew each other, which made what happened there even harder to make sense of. In February 1920, 2 brothers who had just bought the general store were shot during a robbery. The telephone wire had been cut. The manhunt that followed became the largest ever mounted in the American Southwest. In August 1921, the same building was robbed again. The new owners, a husband and wife, were both killed. Their children survived. The killers were caught trying to sell the dead woman's gold teeth to a dentist who recognized them as dental work and reported it. 2 suspects later escaped custody, killed 2 more men in the process, and were recaptured in a chase that involved a plane. The first time one had ever been used in an Arizona manhunt. The mine closed in 1940 and the town was abandoned by 1941. For decades, Ruby operated as a private ghost town open to visitors. As of June 2024, it closed. 25 buildings still stand inside the locked gate, including the 1916 schoolhouse, the jail, and the general store, where 6 people were killed in 2 years. Number 10, Stanton, Arizona. Most mining towns in Arizona died because the gold ran out. This is the rare case where the gold was there. The problem was the man who decided it was all his. The gold at Rich Hill was some of the richest placer deposit ever found in Arizona. Nuggets pulled straight from the surface by hand, no equipment needed. Charles P. Stanton, an Irish immigrant, arrived in the 1870s to what was then a legitimate camp called Antelope Station and immediately saw an opportunity that had nothing to do with mining. He worked his way into control of the businesses, got himself appointed postmaster, and used the position to rename the town after himself. Citizens petitioned to change it back. The name changed. Then a few years later it quietly changed back to Stanton, and nobody could explain why. His competitors had a habit of dying under suspicious circumstances. He was implicated in the murder of an entire family, a man, his wife, and their 2 young sons, But witnesses gave false testimony and the charges were dropped. A local newspaper eventually reported that the residents of Stanton liked to drink blood, eat fried rattlesnakes, and fight mountain lions. That was the town he built. In 1886, Stanton was shot dead in his own hotel by a man named Lucero, avenging an insult to his sister. The gold ran out in 1905. Today, Stanton is owned by a private mining club whose members camp in the desert next to the ruins of a town that a murderer once named after himself. Number 9. Jerome, Arizona. Once the wickedest town in the West, 15,000 people, nearly $1 billion in copper. And then the ground started moving beneath it. What happened after is the part most people don't know. It is the only ghost town in Arizona where the jail moved on its own. Not because anyone broke out, because the constant blasting in the mines below was slowly shaking the entire hillside loose, and residents woke up one day to find the jailhouse had slid 200 feet from where it had been built. It still sits across the road from its original foundation, and it is still the most visited thing in town. The first building ever constructed in Jerome was a 2-story saloon and brothel built by a woman named Nora Butter Brown, who understood the market better than anyone who came after her. The United Verde mine beneath the town eventually produced nearly $1 billion in copper, making it one of the richest operations in North America. When Phelps Dodge bought the operation in 1935 and began open-pit mining with industrial explosives, the blasting destabilized the ground beneath the town. A movie theater, a pharmacy, a pool hall, and a J.C. Penney all moved downhill without anyone's permission. The jail became Jerome's most famous landmark, not because of anyone inside it, but because of where it ended up. The mines closed in 1953 and the population dropped from 15,000 to about 50. Then, in the 1960s, artists and counterculture figures started moving into the abandoned buildings, paying almost nothing for space on a hillside nobody else wanted. Today, Jerome has about 450 residents, more galleries and wine bars than most Arizona cities 10 times its size, and a jail that has been sitting in the wrong place for 90 years. If the stories of places nobody talks about are why you watch this channel, drop a comment and tell me what forgotten town in your state deserves to be on this list. Number 8. Oatman, Arizona Gold, Clark Gable, and a herd of wild donkeys that took over the streets and never left. This is the kind of town that should have disappeared but somehow keeps going. In 1915, a major ore body was found in the Black Mountains of northwestern Arizona, and Oatman exploded into one of the last great gold rushes in the American desert. The population hit 10,000. The mines pulled $36 million in gold out of those mountains. Then the federal government declared gold mining non-essential to the war effort during World War II, and the mines were ordered to close. Workers left overnight for defense jobs. When Route 66 was rerouted in 1953 and bypassed Oatman entirely, the last reason to stop was gone. What kept Oatman alive wasn't anything anyone planned. In 1939, Clark Gable and Carol Lombard chose the Oatman Hotel as their honeymoon destination. Gable loved poker and reportedly came back to play cards with the miners. The suite is still there. But the real reason Oatman is still on the map is the donkeys. When the miners left, they turned their pack animals loose into the desert. Those animals never really left. Their descendants wander in from the mountains every morning, take over Main Street, beg food from tourists, and head back into the hills at night. About 150 people still live in Oatman today, outnumbered on most mornings by animals that have been treating it as their town since the mines closed. Number 7. Vulture City, Arizona. There is an ironwood tree still standing in the Arizona desert with a sign saying 18 men were hanged from its branches. The mine that put them there is still standing, and the man who found the mine died having sold it for almost nothing, while his discovery quietly set off the chain of events that created Phoenix. Henry Wickenburg followed vultures into the desert in 1863 and found a quartz ledge glittering with gold. Within a few years, the Vulture Mine was the richest gold mine in Arizona, 340,000 ounces of gold and 260,000 ounces of silver over its lifetime. A town of nearly 5,000 people grew up around it, and estimates at the time suggested that as much as half of all the gold coming out was being stolen before it ever reached the assay office. That helps explain why the hang tree kept getting used. Wickenburg sold his interest in the mine for $85,000, a fraction of what it produced, and spent the rest of his life watching other people get rich from what he'd found. He died in 1905, shot in what was ruled a suicide, with almost nothing. The mine was shut down in 1942. The buildings were left standing. Today, Vulture City is one of the most intact ghost towns in the state. The assay office, the cookhouse, the miners' quarters, and that hanging tree in the desert outside the ruins of the man's cabin who found it all and got almost nothing. Number 6. Fairbank, Arizona. Fairbank was never meant to be a destination. It was a waypoint, the place between the railroad and Tombstone. The moment Tombstone didn't need it, it had maybe a week left. Fairbank existed for exactly one reason. It was the closest railroad stop to Tombstone. Every supply going into one of the most famous cities in the American West came through this small depot on the San Pedro River, and every ounce of silver coming out went through it first. When the Tombstone mines flooded in 1886 and the silver stopped moving, Fairbank lost its purpose in almost the same week. Fairbank grew fast around the depot. Saloons, a school, a Wells Fargo office, and a stagecoach connection running the last 10 miles into Tombstone. It was a bottleneck town. Everything that mattered to territorial Arizona's most important city passed through here. Before it vanished quietly, Fairbank got one last moment on the map. In 1900, the Burt Alvord gang attempted to rob the express car in one of the last train robberies of the Old West. They shot the Wells Fargo messenger Jeff Milton through the arm and fled with almost nothing. Milton held them off alone, wounded, until help arrived. The robbers were eventually caught. The last residents left in the 1970s. Today, the schoolhouse, the adobe mercantile, and the outhouses are still standing along the San Pedro River. The town that existed entirely to serve Tombstone outlasted most of Tombstone itself. Number 5. Charleston, Arizona. Everyone knows Tombstone. Almost nobody knows the town 3 miles away where the Clanton gang actually operated, and it has been so completely erased that most people driving through that stretch of Arizona today have no idea it ever existed. It was Tombstone's working twin, the mill town down the San Pedro River where the ore was processed, where the outlaws the Tombstone lawmen couldn't quite pin down went to disappear for a while, and where the Clanton gang ran their cattle smuggling operation across the Mexican border. Tombstone got the legend. This was where the actual business happened. When the Tombstone mines needed their ore processed, it came here. The river provided the water. Within a year of opening, Charleston had several hundred residents, and the Clantons, whose confrontation with the Earps at the OK Corral in 1881 is the most famous gunfight in American history, were using the town as their base of operations. When the Tombstone mines flooded in 1886 and the ore stopped coming, Charleston's mills had nothing to process. The town emptied out within months. The San Pedro River floods did the rest over the following decades, washing away the adobe until almost nothing remained above ground. Today, most of the Charleston town site is under the water table. A few rock foundations are visible in the brush near the river. The town where the Clantons operated has been so thoroughly erased that most visitors to the area have no idea it was ever there. Number 4. Swansea, Arizona. Someone decided to build a smelter in the middle of the Arizona desert. A mining expert toured the site and called it foolish before it even opened. He was right, and the ruins are still out there to prove it. When a railroad reached the remote desert near Parker in 1904 and made the area accessible for the first time, developers moved in fast. A hotel, a theater, a saloon, a car dealership, 500 workers, and a massive smelter built to process copper ore on site. A mining expert who toured the operation in 1913 wrote that Swansea was an example of enthusiasm run wild, reckless stock selling, and the construction of surface works before enough ore had been found to justify any of it. The smelter cost 3 cents per pound more to run than copper was selling for on the market. The ore had to be shipped elsewhere to be processed anyway. The company went bankrupt in 1912. A later operator managed a few profitable years before copper prices collapsed after World War I, and the town died for good. By 1937, it was completely abandoned, 30 miles from the nearest water in the middle of the Arizona desert. The adobe walls of the mine manager's house, the railroad depot, and the worker cottages are still standing today. A monument to a project that a mining expert called foolish before the concrete had finished setting. Number 3. Gleason, Arizona. In the early 1900s, someone opened a car dealership in the middle of the Arizona desert east of Tombstone. That level of confidence tells you everything you need to know about what happened next. Gleason had copper, a hospital, electric lights, a movie theater, and that car dealership, all of it appearing within a few years of a major copper strike in 1900. The town had 500 residents, a school, and a stone jail that is still standing today. The copper played out in the 1930s. A fire tore through the commercial district. The hospital closed, the theater closed, and the car dealership became a ruin alongside everything else. What remains is the 1910 jail, now a small museum, along with the ruins of the hospital, the schoolhouse foundation, and a cemetery in the Dragoon Mountain foothills. The jail has outlasted everything around it. Everything else is crumbling adobe and the quiet of a place that expected to become something and didn't. Number 2. Chloride, Arizona. Most of the towns on this list are completely empty. This one almost joined them, and the reason it didn't is one of the stranger survival stories in Arizona. Chloride grew into the oldest continuously inhabited mining town in Arizona, with silver feeding over 75 working mines at its peak and 5,000 residents by 1900. The post office it opened in 1873 is still running today, one of the oldest in the state. When the mines closed in 1944 and silver prices collapsed, the population crashed from 5,000 to a few dozen almost overnight. What kept it alive was a small group of people who never left, and in the 1960s, a painter named Roy Purcell, who camped in the hills above town and painted enormous murals directly onto the rock face above the desert. People who have never heard of chloride still drive hours to see them. Today, around 250 people live there. The 1873 post office is still open. The murals are still on the rock. The town that should have died in 1944 is still there, held together by people who had nowhere better to be, and a painter who left something on the mountain that outlasted everything else. Number 1. Vulture City and the founding of Phoenix, Arizona. This is the one that should be taught in school. A ghost town sitting in the Arizona desert accidentally started the 5th largest city in the United States, and most people drive through that city every day without knowing any of it. It starts with Vulture City needing food. 5,000 miners in the desert required grain, and the nearest source was too far away. A former Confederate officer named Jack Swilling rode through the Salt River Valley in 1867 and noticed something pressed into the earth, the outline of canals the Hohokam had built centuries earlier to farm the desert. The Hohokam were long gone. The canals weren't. Swilling raised money, including from Henry Wickenburg himself, redug the ancient channels, and brought water back to the valley to grow grain for the Vulture mine. The farming settlement that grew up around those canals needed a name. A business partner named Darrell Duppa suggested Phoenix, a city rising from the ruins of a civilization that came before. The name stuck. Phoenix was incorporated in 1881 and became the territorial capital in 1889. Today, it is the 5th largest city in the United States, home to nearly 5 million people, sitting on top of an irrigation system rebuilt from the ruins of a civilization that had been farming the same land 1,000 years earlier. The ghost town that started all of it is still out there, 14 miles south of Wickenburg. The assay office is still standing. The hanging tree is still there. Grand Avenue in Phoenix still runs in a straight line toward Vulture City because it was originally the grain supply route between the two places. You can drive that road today without knowing it exists because a prospector followed a vulture into the desert in 1863 and found gold. Drop a comment and tell me what town or place in Arizona we should cover next. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.